There you go.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for joining us this morning in this very important topic on gender identity and how, as parents, we should be addressing this topic. We are blessed to have Sister Noha Alshugairi, I guess the best way of pronouncing her, Alshugairi. MashaAllah, she had received her PhD in Islamic Studies from the Graduate Theology Foundation and followed her MS in counseling from California State University in Fullerton. She also has her BA in zoology from Rutgers University. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice here in California. She strongly believes in the power of encouraging therapeutic relationship to effect changes. As a certified positive discipline lead trainer, she conducts parenting classes on a regular basis. In her practice, she also utilizes positive discipline to help parents and children who have a better connected relationship. She frequently lectures on issues related to women, family, mental health. Noha with Munira Al-Zaldin, they have co-authored Positive Parenting, the Positive Parenting, the Muslim Home. She has been married for 38 years, mashallah, and she has 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren. May Allah bless them all. We welcome you. Thank you for taking time to join us this morning, and the floor is yours. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you, Dr. Taib. Thank you, Huwaida, Jazakumullah khair, for granting us, all of us, this opportunity to discuss an issue that's on the minds of many of us with young kids, subhanAllah. Especially for us, those who are living in a non-Muslim majority country, because we tend to struggle between, what does Islam say and what does the dominant culture say. So we as parents, as educators, we need to have a good understanding of what's going on in the majority culture so we can actually better be equipped to respond to our children, interact with them, and talk to them in a more effective way about these issues. Bismillah, today I would actually like to hear from the attendees. If you can, please jot down in the chat. We're just going to take a minute. When you heard about the title of this particular presentation or discussion or workshop, what were some of the questions that you wanted answered? And so I'm not going to promise that we're going to answer all of them, but I would love to hear what's on your mind, because also, even if I don't answer it today, it will help me actually understand what's going on with our community and what are the concerns. But if you don't mind, just write down your questions in the chat. And then for those of you who would like your question to be private, I think Huwaida, we said they can privately message you, and Dr. Taib, they can privately message you, and Dr. Taib, your question.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So we're just going to take a minute to write down these questions, and I'm going to go and grab a copy of the Positive Parenting in the Muslim Home so I can show it to you guys. Let's see. Well, I'm not seeing questions in the chat. Okay, 1. Oh, here, 2. Okay, social media we're going to talk about next week. So today we're not going to address social media. Yes, there is a worry about the curriculum in the public schools, and we're going to maybe talk about how can we handle, or what can we do about this. We'll see. This topic, because it's comes up all the time, like in the US, living in the US. I've been living in the US now, alhamdulillah, for 38 years. 38 years. There is always something, okay? Because this is part of life. So if it's not gender identity now, okay, it could be something else in a few years. So we just have to do what we can. So, okay. When we see gay action on TV, how can I explain to my kids? Okay, hopefully we're gonna, you know, kind of in a way address or talk or allude to this, inshallah, bismillah. What we can do if our kids have friends from school who are not heterosexual. Yep. Yeah. Okay. I guess, inshallah, we can start. And if there are other questions, inshallah, just have them in the chat and we'll see where we go, inshallah. Bismillah. So if I may have, can I share my screen? Inshallah.
Yes, you can.
Okay. 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 Let's see this one. Okay. So we did the first part, which is basically asking you what are your questions. And when we are talking about the gender identity question, there are many terms that come up in the discussion. And so we're gonna discuss the different layers of this topic and hopefully give you some idea about what does it mean in the US. When we're talking about gender identity, we're talking about sexual identity, and I'm going to explain all this in a little bit. But some of the questions that are coming up: am I a male? Am I a female? Am I attracted to same gender, other gender? We are hearing a lot nowadays about the word non-binary. We hear also heterosexual, homosexual. And I want to also draw your attention to like the adjectives we use in the English and in the Arabic. So we have the male versus female, and we have a man versus woman. And I'm hoping we're gonna allude to what are the differences between these. So the 5 layers we're gonna discuss today are the following: genetic makeup. And I'm sure under COVID, every one of us have heard about the genes because it had to do with the virus and it had to do with how the vaccine was actually created. There was a lot of work in the genetic sphere and the gene sphere that had to do with COVID. So we're going to talk about the genetic makeup. We're going to talk about morphology. And morphology, in simple words, it means what does the eye see? What do I see on the outside? And gender, and I'll address that in a bit. And then sexual orientation and the romantic inclinations, which is another layer maybe we're not talking a lot about in Yani. It's not a major concern for many people, but I'm seeing it in my office. And we'll discuss this also again. So step by step, it all begins with the genes. So as I'm sure all of you know, every single cell in the human body has a nucleus, and in the nucleus there is the nuclear material, and that is basically broken down into small units, and every unit is called a gene. We have what is called 23 pairs of chromosomes in the human cell, and a chromosome is basically a collection of genes that come together, and they are together. When it comes to sex, there is a specific pair that actually determines whether someone is a man or a woman, a male or a female, and those are called the sex chromosomes. So on the right hand of your screen, you see like two X's, and this is what usually scientists say, that a female in her makeup, in her genetic makeup, she has two X chromosomes, like you see exactly on the screen right now. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see another pair. One looks like an X and one looks like a Y. And that pair is the one that is in the makeup of men. Like the sex chromosomes of men have one X and one Y, and the sex chromosomes of a female has one X, two X's. So far, so good. Is that clear? Any questions about this? And if we take it a step further, and I know for some of you who don't have a biological big background, this might be a little bit, not very clear. So if there's something in particular you do not understand about that, just, let me know. And for most of you, I hope most of you know that what determines whether a fetus, a child is going to be male or female is what type of chromosome is in the sperm of the father that actually inoculated the ova of the woman, of the mother. So a father can give a sperm with a Y, and then that will actually meet up with an X from the mother, and that will produce a male fetus. A father also can have a sperm with an X chromosome, and that will meet up with the X chromosome from the mother, and that will bring us into having a female fetus. It's not only, so this is what we call the genetic makeup of us humans in terms of the sex chromosomes. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in his creation. For those of us who study science, we're always in awe of the scientific, of how Allah allows the process of actually the creation of a fetus, or especially, in the womb. So it's not only a matter of what are the sexual chromosomes of the fetus in the embryo. Between the second month and the fourth month of gestation, subhanallah, there is a specific process that takes place, and it is as such. If there is two X's in the genes of the fetus, okay, then the fetus is going to develop as a female. And the development of a female in terms of organs, whether internal or external, is actually the default of the human development, of the human embryonic development. If there is a Y chromosome in the fetus, then testosterone is going to be produced in the fetus between the second month and the fourth month. And that the testosterone is what actually is going to initiate the development of the male sexual organs, whether internal or external. And that's how the fetus becomes a male later on. So now that's the genetic makeup, and that is how it's connected to the morphology, like what we see on the outside. What we see on the outside is we see external features of the male and external features of the female. And those are directly related and connected to the genetic makeup of the fetus or the child. So next step. Okay, before I show you the next slide, I would like you to look at it vertically. So I'm going to show you a slide with different columns. So we're going to look at it, we're going to read it vertically, and we're going to read it from the right to the left. And if at any given moment anyone is confused, please also send me a comment or a question in the chat so I can stop and explain it to you in the moment, rather than continuing and you're lost with this. So these are the 5 layers of sexuality as we are hearing about it in the US. So beginning with the right column here, this is the column that explains the genes, the one I just explained to you right now. So female has two X chromosomes. A male has an X and Y sex chromosome. Very rare situations, very rare, okay, that a fetus will have a different combination than what I have already listed to you, and what is normal and what is in almost all, most of the human population. Very rare situations where we might have a different combination of the X and Y in terms of like the numbers. So we will have more than 2 sex chromosomes. And I'm not going to go into these details, but those specific, they happen. It's not like they don't happen, they happen. And the ramifications of that, they cause certain problems that we're not going to go into. My main focus, though, is that this is actually very, very rare. Because sometimes when you hear about this gender identity talk, they talk about it and say that, oh, it's very normal, there is a biological component to it. And I want to emphasize that if they are talking about genetic makeup and that it explains this gender confusion, that's a very, very, very minor percentage of the human population. So this is the genetic makeup. Morphology is whether the person is exhibiting the female external organs or the male external organs. So it's either male or female, you know. Next to that, we come now to the big topic nowadays, which is the gender identity, which subhanAllah, like almost like when we wrote the book, Munira and I, and we finished writing the book in 2016, at that time, the gender identity piece was not like dominant. There wasn't really a lot of talk about it like it is nowadays. The issue at that time was the sexual orientation issue. So I'm just, you know, I just want to emphasize that there will always be something we have to struggle with. There will always be something we need to understand. And so we need to do our work, we need to do our research, we need to understand it, and then know how to handle it with our children. So now we come to the gender identity. Again, we're reading it vertically. So what are the types of gender identities, if you will? So we have what is called cisgender. And what does cisgender mean? It means that the genetic makeup, sorry, I didn't explain to you what gender means. Nowadays, in the talk that is happening in our narrative in the US, gender refers to how me as a person, how do I identify myself? Do I identify myself as a female or a male or a non-binary? Non-binary meaning I'm not a male, I'm not a female. I'm something neutral. I'm basically saying I'm rejecting being identified as one or the other. And I want you to identify me as a non-binary. And so the pronoun that you need to use with me is going to be they. I don't want you to tell me she if I'm as a female, and I don't want you to tell me he as a male. I am a they. That's what non-binary means. So gender nowadays in the US is relating to what is the individual definition of me as a person. How do I define myself in terms of a woman or a man? And how do I want you to address me? So now we have cisgender, and cisgender means that my gender aligns with my morphology, with how you see me, and it aligns with my genetic makeup. That's the cisgender. They align. They're the same. There's no conflict there. No problem. Transgender, on the other hand, is I am the opposite of what you see me, what you see, and I'm also the opposite of my genetic makeup. So that's the transgender. And the non-binary, I explained to you already. Any questions about this? Any confusion about this? So far, we're okay. Just want to make sure that there was no question. Okay, yeah. Okay, now we're coming to the yellow column, which relates to the orientation. Orientation here, sexual orientation, talks about how me as a person, I'm attracted, who am I attracted to, and who do I have fantasies about in my sexual dreams. Heterosexual people are people who are attracted and have fantasies about the other gender. So if I'm a female, I am attracted and have fantasies about males. If I'm a male, I'm gonna have fantasies and I'm attracted to females. That's heterosexuals. Homosexuals, on the other hand, are the group who are attracted to same gender. So if I'm a male, I'm attracted and I have fantasies about males. If I'm a female, I'm attracted and I have fantasies about other females. And in our culture nowadays in the US, typically they used to say use the word gay for homosexual men, and use the word lesbian for homosexual females. Nowadays, sometimes they use gay to mean both. It doesn't mean that we're talking about specifically homosexual males. It could also mean that we're talking about homosexual females. There are so many definitions in this area, and every now and then people come up with different definitions. So it's just a matter of like keeping track and being up to date with what is changing. So if we go back to the term that Huwaida had in the flyer, she had LGBTQ. So L will be lesbian, G would be gay, T transgender, Q would be queer, which could mean anything. That's why you need to check with that particular person what do they mean? How do they define themselves? The bisexual is a group of people who are attracted and they have fantasies about both genders, same gender and other gender. And this column about sexual orientation is related to the actual sexual act, the actual sexual activity. And this is important, especially when we come to the last column, which is called romantic, which is also a new thing that came up in the last few years. And I'm beginning to see it in my office, which is basically the people talking about just having romantic feelings toward someone else and not necessarily associated with sexual feelings. So I could be romantically have a romantic feelings towards someone, but no sexual feelings attached to it. So again, same thing. It could be that I have some romantic feelings toward the other gender, or it could be someone from the same gender, or it could be biromantic, where I will have romantic feelings towards people who are same gender like me, or people who are from the opposite gender from me. And again, this one does not mean that this is associated with sexual feelings. It could just be that I'm just having romantic feelings towards this person. I'm so attached, or I'm so obsessed with this person. I love them so much. Any questions about these 5 layers of the sexual identity in the US? I'm not sure I understand.
There is actually, yeah, there is one question. Go ahead, sister.
But I don't know what is different. What's the different exactly? Can you explain to us, Shaima? What do you mean different?
Shaima, can you talk, my dear?
Yes, I'm talking about what is the difference between orientation and romantic. Is romantic, it's like a normal life, like when we have a romantic relationship with my peer at school, or
So
you know,
part of it is that exactly what you're saying, which like, you know, for many people, like they will call it crushes, like you're having a crush on someone. And so I think we understood the idea of crush and having romantic feelings towards someone else when it came to the other gender. But what was different for me, for example, as a therapist, when I started seeing young people in my office who are talking to me about having romantic feelings towards same gender, that was something new for me. And also when they started telling me that they are biromantic, really, honestly, I learned about this from my clients. I had no idea. Okay, I mean, I had my client explain to me what she's a female in high school. So I had her explain to me, what do you mean by you are biromantic? Because I've never heard that term before. And then I went and I did, you know, some research, and it's basically just having this overwhelming feelings of love and adoration towards someone else. So again, just like we are doing in the sexual orientation and the gender, it could be towards same gender or it could be towards other gender. So did I answer your question, Shaima?
yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, now, as you can see, the issue of sexuality is very nuanced and very complicated also.
There is other questions, أخت نوها.
Okay, shukran. Could some gender romantic be confused with friendship? You know, I personally think so, but when you have someone who's telling you, no, it's so different than a friendship, you need to take their word for it, and that this is what they believe. You know, okay, how am I gonna say? Okay, when I was growing up, and this was in the 70s, early 70s, yeah. And I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I know, like, some of my colleagues at school, they had really very strong relationships with some of their colleagues. So my guess, and this is my guess, because again, we're talking about a new phenomena, and we're not talking about something that science have studied, if you will. We're talking about a phenomena, a social phenomena that people are sharing with us, and we are trying to explain. So if we go back to the 70s, I had colleagues who had very, very strong and intense attachment to same gender colleagues at school. And my guess is that particular kind of, like, if you will, friendship or relationship is what people nowadays, in terms of same gender, are calling romantic. But that's only my guess, okay? Because again, it's not something as science we have studied. We're just taking the words of people, what they're telling us, and we're trying to make sense of it. Okay, so far? Okay, let's see. Okay. So before I move on to the next slide, I want to present to you and posit to you the idea that the gender identity here, the one in this column, the one about am I a woman, am I a man, has to, it's more of a social construct than a biological construct. It's about how me as a person, how do I think about myself, and how do I want to be perceived and treated by other people. Of course, there will be some people who would say, no, no, it's not merely a social construct. It's not merely a perception. There is definitely some biological component to it. But we as science, if we look at the science, we really don't have very clear-cut evidence to say that there is something very clearly in the biology and the genes that defines that someone can say, even though their gene is like 2 X's and they're female, that then they can say that they are a male. We don't have yet clear-cut studies about this issue. So me, Noha, personally, my take and the take of other also psychologists and therapists is the gender piece is more of a social construct piece. It's more about the interrelationships between me as a person and other people in the society. So if we were to think about it and look at it, what do you think are the Islamic ideas about gender versus the human ideas about gender? And I would love to hear from you because I'm sure you all have ideas about what do you think Islam says about the ideas of gender, about how a person defines himself as a man or a woman. And you can unmute yourself and speak if you would like to share.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Noha. This is Hind. I think that what I understood what you said is like, you know how we say rajul or like a man or a male. And like, it depends. My understanding for what you're saying is like how they perceive themselves as is like, what's the social and the stereotype identification of what a man is and how they put themselves in that particular definition. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. So I'm asking what would be the Islamic ideas about gender? Yes, you're right.
Yeah, so basically if you are providing for your family, so you are the rajul of the like al-bayt, or you're responsible for that, for your household and for your family. So your social definition, you are the rajul. But if the woman is responsible and doing all the chores that the man is doing, so our society identify her as the man of the household.
Oh, that's an interesting take. Wow, I didn't even think about that. But you're actually giving us an example of how it is a social construct. Yes.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to understand, because it's very interesting how you said it's a social identification, how we perceive it as like our gender. Is it a female or a male? It doesn't have to be sexuality.
No, because you gave us an example from the American culture, how if she is like doing everything, then she becomes the man of the house.
Yes. And for us, Islam, it's totally different, because I don't know how to say it in Arabic. It's a rajul, or what's the other word? It's I don't know if someone can help me. There's the male and the female, but I can't.
So we have unsa wa dhakar, and we have rajul wa imra'a.
Yeah. So like you're born being a dhakar, but it doesn't mean you are the anta al-rajul, because you have a certain social standards you have to fit yourself in to be identified as a rajul. Right?
Very, thank you so much for sharing this, because that's exactly speaks to the problem that is our young people are struggling with. Because we as a society, as a Muslim society, we have also our ethnic understandings of the role of a rajul or a man, and the role of a woman or a imra. And those ethnic understandings of the roles, the social roles, actually interfere sometimes with how our young people understand Islam or understand themselves, and they can cause problems. And since you raised this, I want to jump to something actually. What are we as a society, as an American Muslim society? What are some of the sexual roles messages that we are sending to our young people that actually does not help them and cause them confusion, and may actually lead them to reject their actual gender identity that is based on their genes, and choose the other identity. What are we doing? We're not helping our young people. I'm not saying all of our young people, but some of our young people who are struggling with this issue are coming from a place of being hurt and burnt by the messages we send in our community. So if you guys were to think about some of these messages, what would they be? And anyone can share.
If I can continue talking,
Mhm.
it's also like, for example, careers. We put like women in certain careers and men in certain careers, and like what we implant in our kids' head. I was like, he's an engineer, you're a teacher, for example. It's like I heard it a lot growing up. I was like, be a teacher so you can go home with your kids when they go home. You know, it's putting all these stereotypes, and exactly what you said, like it pushes the kids away and from it, because that's my struggle. So like, culture is different than Islam. It's culturally, we are putting us as women or men in certain boxes, that it's making the new generation being very defensive and pushing these standards away, make them go to the extreme. I don't want to be put in this. I don't want to be put in this women image. And I always tell my sisters, like, women, like the women movement and being womenized, especially in the Middle East, it's taken to the extreme that it's making the girl doing not feminine things, or being, I just want to be rebellious. It doesn't matter. Like, make them put the idea, I just want to be rebellious about being a woman, but it doesn't really mean like you being rebellious about being a female. They just take it to the extreme, and it really doesn't benefit them in the long run.
Right. So a very important message, one of the areas of messages we're sending to our young people is about careers. You're absolutely right. Like, or for example, you know, not encouraging, and I don't see this as much in the Muslim community in terms of like maybe minimizing a woman's ability, for example, to actually be in the scientific, you know, realm. Because I believe in our faith, we emphasize knowledge, and we emphasize knowledge for everybody. So I'm not seeing it as a big problem like in other communities, where women within our community, actually, you will find a lot of highly educated women in the Muslim community, just because of the emphasis on the idea of knowledge and career. But career is one area where we send different messages to men and women in our community. What other messages also do we send that are not helping? And I'm talking here about the ethnic and cultural messages. I'm not talking about the Islamic messages. And I'm going to emphasize here, if you go back to the Quran uses the two descriptions of talks about dhakar wa untha, okay, which is male and female. And when you read the ayahs that talk about dhakar wa untha, there is the ayat that talks about females, that they are the ones who are the carriers of children. So like, it's really very, very clear about that the untha and the dhakar is more of a biological. It's more about the genetic makeup. And then when you read the other ayahs that talk about men and women, it talks more about the roles, and it talks more about the social interactions. So I just want to be very clear that from an Islamic point of view, a purely Islamic point of view, Islam is not as stereotypical of the roles of men and women, except in very limited areas. But the culture, the ethnic culture of the Muslim communities is the one that is imposing much more broader stereotypical sexual roles on men and women. And this is where we have the problem. This is where our young people are struggling. When you have women growing up in households where they are not being respected because they are women, when you have women who are growing up in households where her brother is always favored over her because he's a male, when you have parents who, and I know most of are listening to us right now are not, you're not like that, but I'm just sharing with you some of the ideas that are in our community and are causing harm. And they need to shift so we can help our young people be proud and having izzah of their gender identity that is based on their genetic makeup and not struggle with it. Any we have questions?
There is actually a Sister Noha, there is a question actually about the Quran, if you can see the chat.
Okay, can you read it, Huwaida? Sorry. What is the question of gender identity has been addressed in the Quran before asking what is the Islamic idea of gender? So that's what I was talking about just now, in terms of if you read the different ayahs that talk about dhakar wa untha, which is male and female, and that would be the genetic component and the biological component. And you read also the other ayah that talks about men and women, and that would be more of the gender identity and the sexual roles, like the social sexual roles. And again, I'm emphasizing here, Islam did not restrict the social roles of men and women as we in a culture, ethnic culture, have restricted those. And I want to emphasize this very much. Okay, because and the evidence to that is actually in the seerah and in the stories of the Prophet, the story of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. And I'll just mention one small example. Like sometimes some Muslim communities, like they look down on, for example, a woman participating in war and fighting. But you know, have they ever heard of the story of Nusayba bint Ka'b, who actually in the Battle of Uhud was standing in front of the Prophet ﷺ, defending the Prophet ﷺ. And she was injured during that, during that battle. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell her, oh my God, you're a woman. How can you stand in front of me protecting me? No, you need to go away. There was women, if they knew what they were capable for, they did it. They were not restricted just because they were women, but there was respect and there was collaboration between the men and women of Medina at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is sometimes what our young people do not understand. They don't get that because they only get about Islam like a severe separation of men and women, and some messages where women are are looked down upon or dismissed. So it's very unfortunate. And I'm talking to you about an actual case that came to me through my office, and I saw this this situation where a young woman who grew up in a household where her father did not appreciate her mom, and she felt a very put down and oppressed, and she's very capable. She grew up and just over the last 2 years she decided to do the sex change operation, to change to a man, because she wants to be respected by those around her. So she felt for herself that if I become a man, then I'm gonna get the respect that I want. This is what I'm talking about. So
I have a quick question.
Sorry?
I have a question. You give the example of some reasons why females would want to identify themselves as males, right? From our culture. But what would be an example for the opposite case? Why would a male want to identify themselves as himself as a female from our culture?
So there are many different reasons, but okay, so I'll share a lot, and I'll share some, I mean, not a lot, but I want to also emphasize that this whole thing is very nuanced. Okay, it's not clear, it's not black and white. There are so many layers and so many factors, but I'll share some. So if you have a male, for example, who is who has the homosexual orientation. And he grew up, and when he was a child, he was, for example, more sensitive, more emotionally sensitive, more artistic, and he was always put down that no, you can't be artistic, you can't be sensitive. Grows up, finds out that he has a homosexual orientation, and it's easier for him, or he sees himself, it's easier for him to be seen as a woman, because it fits the stereotype of a woman, being more sensitive, being artistic. Again, we go back to the stereotypes. Yeah. I'm just giving, you know, an example. It doesn't mean this is the case for everybody. And again, this is a very complicated and very nuanced topic. And also, I am not sharing this to put blame on parents or blame on the community. I am just really trying to make you aware of the different factors that sometimes young people come and say, this is the reason why I want to change my gender, or this is the reason why I want to do the sex change operation. Unfortunately, it is what it is. So, okay, in your practice, what are you seeing as the reason for this current epidemic of gender dysphoria? So I am going to jump to the one of the last slides on the for today. So these are different factors that are contributing to the dissonance, and the dissonance, what I'm talking about here, the dissonance between what the secular culture is saying about these topics and what does Islam say about these topics. This is the dissonance for me. Number one is actually our young people's misunderstanding of Islam. This is my number one factor. Many of our young people have the idea that Islam is very harsh, God is very punishing, and God is not understanding, and Islam is very judgmental. And so when our young people see themselves as failing to actually achieve this perfect, sometimes what we present as the perfect standard of how to be a Muslim, it becomes easier for them to really reject the Islamic ideas and adopt the other secular ideas, because the other secular ideas seem to be more inclusive and more forgiving for them. And it's easier for them to live with that rather than live with some of the misunderstanding of Islam and feel that they are not good enough and that they are sinning all the time. So this is my number one, because I will tell you, there are Muslims who have the homosexual orientation, but because their Islamic perception or Islamic faith is very strong, they do not leave Islam because they understand Islam very well. And they understand that, you know, the homosexual act is forbidden and they choose not to do it. So just, yeah, again, so this is my number one reason. Of course, the others are all self-explanatory. Secular ideas are global now because of the internet. The individualistic cultural ideas of the US and the West is overwhelmingly, you know, influencing the whole world. There is a difference between looking at the world from an individualistic lens, which is all about me, and what's in it for me, and how can I be happy. And the Islamic perspective or the Islamic lens is about interdependence. Interdependence, that's the Islamic perspective of society. What does it mean? It means that we collaborate together, we work together. I respect your needs as an individual, and you as an individual, you also have a responsibility towards the society. So it's not purely individualistic and it's not purely collectivistic. We are in the middle between the two types of societies. Definitely one of the big problems nowadays is what is being taught in school, as some of you alluded in the beginning, the questions, like the curriculums. The curriculums have changed over the last 20 years in terms of sexual orientation, and in terms nowadays specifically also about gender identity. And you have families now who are also trying to raise their kids with this idea of being gender neutral. It's like, oh, when you grow up, you decide if you're a man or a woman. Meaning of life is connected to the understanding of Islam in terms of what does life mean to me? What is my driver? What is the theory I use to actually deal with life? Next one is emotional dysregulation, which is sometimes people don't know how to deal with their childhood wounds, their childhood problems, and they try to find solutions that they think that they are going to help them, and follow whatever they are seeing or hearing about in the mainstream. Of course, the influence of others and the absence of parental influence. I'm emphasizing in the absence of parental influence because our children are always going to be influenced by their friends. There is no running away from that. And it's not a good idea to isolate them and put them in a bubble and prevent them from having friends with the outside world. But what is important is that we are engaged in their life, that we are actually there with them. We're observing what's going on with them. We're having communication. We're having discussions with them. And the last one is what we talked about already, which is the difficulty with the imposed stereotypical sex roles. And that's why I emphasize that from an Islamic point of view, we do not have a very rigid and wide stereotypical sexual roles. On the contrary, it's like very limited in very small areas. And so we need to go back to that in our families. We need to go back and embrace that Islamic perception, Islamic view, because that's going to be very helpful for our children. And since I'm talking about the factors contributing to the dissonance, I'm going to go ahead and talk about how can we help our children specifically with this gender identity confusion or sexual, or specifically gender identity for now. So in early childhood, I really encourage our parents not to be confused about whether do I need to tell my son that he's a boy, or what do I do? Like, is what they're teaching at school right? That, you know, a child has to really define for himself or herself that he's a boy or he's a girl. And I'm being very clear with you. Our job from an Islamic perspective is not to confuse our children. So we need to tell them they are boys and they are girls depending on their genetic makeup. This is our job, okay? Children don't have the maturity or the intellectual ability or the cognitive ability to answer these big questions. It is unjust to actually put that responsibility on them. So we have to be strong. We have to be clear in how we are interacting with our children and being clear on who they are, boys or girls. And we need to talk, okay, you're like mama, you're like baba. We need to give them that in the family. Who are they? You know, who are they like? Another one is to treat boys and girls equally, which goes back to the messages, the messages that sometimes our culture send. They're not very helpful. So I'll share with you, for example, a message. Like from an early on, we tell the boy, oh, okay, Habibi, you're a boy, you don't need to do anything. And we tell the girl, oh, you're a girl, you're gonna grow up and you're gonna grow up and take care of the house. Of course, come and help mama. No, I'm gonna have my son also come and help in the kitchen too. I'm not gonna tell them from early on, okay, this is where you're destined. Okay, you're not gonna do anything at home and you're gonna do everything at home. Allow children to play with all toys, and don't be restrictive and whether boys and girls, they both do chores, depending on their ability, depending on their inclination, and of course, depending on the age. And then when you are talking about the genital organs, also please make sure you use the correct anatomical names. Don't give them some, weird nicknames, and then they go to school, use these nicknames with their friends, and then friends go on like, what are you talking about? We don't know what you're talking about. Let's be very, this is part of their body. So teach them the actual correct names for these organs. Later childhood and adolescence, definitely emphasize the role models, good, correct role models for the different genders. Again, I'm going to emphasize this again and again, treating boys and girls equally. For example, in our community, sometimes I see this all the time. The girl has a curfew. She has to be back home by 8 p.m. while the boy can stay out as long as he wants. And when the girl questions why, and she is told, you're a girl, he's a boy. This is the type of stuff I'm talking about. So if you are worried about the girl, then make sure that the boy has a curfew too. Same thing. Don't tell them, oh, you're a girl, you're a boy. Definitely discussing puberty whenever you know that they need to learn about it, and there are many dimensions to discussing puberty: physical, religious, and emotional. I'll share with you. My kids went to Islamic school, and I didn't think that I needed to have the sexual discussion or the sexual talk. But it was until I figured maybe we'll begin talking about it when my eldest is in 6th grade. But then the whole discussion was forced upon me. And what happened, and again, my kids were, and my 2 eldest are boys. Okay, again, they were in Islamic school. So what happened is one day we're coming back from school, and then my second son, who was in 4th grade, he tells me that today I found out how actually babies are made. He's in 4th grade, okay? And I was waiting like for 6th grade. I don't know, I had in my mind that 6th grade is a good, maybe because that's when I learned about it myself in 6th grade. I thought 6th grade, I'll sit with them, we'll have this discussion. So this is how it is in the car. I have a girl in the car who was younger. She was maybe in 2nd grade at that time, and I had also a toddler. We come home, I immediately take my 2 boys, one in 5th grade, one in 4th grade. I take them into the laundry room, I lock the door, and then I say to my 4th grader, I'm like, so what did you learn at school today about what did they tell you about this? And right then and there, we had the sex talk in the laundry room. It was forced upon me just because of what happened. But my point to you is we need to have the discussion with them, and you may have in your mind an idea about when you're going to have the discussion, but sometimes something might happen and you need to grab that teaching moment and use it and have it to actually discuss it. Please don't ignore this talk with your children. Some parents, they find it hard to talk about this issue with their children, but no matter how awkward it is, how difficult it is, it's better for them to understand these really important points and understand your view as a parent about these different areas from you. If you personally don't know, then actually seek out knowledge, go find out what you need to do, and be there for your children to have this discussion with them. Okay, so also, besides discussing puberty, also having family conversations about different aspects of sexuality when it comes up. For example, someone in the beginning asked about how do we talk about this if it comes up in a movie. And my kids are seeing this, and they're seeing they're seeing a gay couple on the movie. What do? You sit down with them and you talk about it in very simple words, and don't make it a big lecture, because kids actually can tune you out very quickly it can be very boring for them. So very simple, explain the situation, and then ask them, do you have questions for me? They say no, then you can say, well, you know, if any questions comes up for you, come and ask me. Don't ever hesitate. I'm always here for you. When you are talking about the issue of homosexuality or the transgender issue, please be mindful to differentiate between respecting people and not liking the behavior, because your kids are going to encounter, whether at school or college or work, people who have the homosexual orientation or people who are transgender, and they need to differentiate between how to deal with these people with respect and dignity, and how to not like you know, the behavior that is not condoned by Islam. Very important, because our children sometimes they take what we say about homosexuality and they go to school and they start, for example, attacking someone who has the homosexual orientation at school, and they get in trouble. And so we need to be conscious and aware of the context we are living in and how we need to deal with it. Another point here is really definitely teaching boys and young men to respect women and not to see women as merely sexual objects. And the other thing, the last point here is to emphasize to our children that there is no haya in deen, there is no haya in faith, meaning like we can ask any questions in our faith, and not to be scared of coming to you and asking you questions about this issue. It's much more important they hear from you, because if they don't hear from you, they're gonna go on the internet and find sometimes the wrong answers, or they're gonna go to their friends and also find wrong answers. So we need to be available. We need to have a safety between us so they can feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you about these issues. Okay.
There is few questions. Noha,
Okay. So let me just finish this last slide and then I'll address, inshallah, the question.
Sure.
Bismillah. So here I wanted to share with you, there is a famous psychologist, his name is Erik Erikson, and he divided the lifespan into what we call the psychosocial stages. And for every stage, he said that the child or the young adult or the older adult, every person is struggling with a specific question, if you will, during every stage. So I wanted to highlight to you that the issue of gender, meaning, am I a boy or am I a girl? This question begins to be asked and formulated in the toddler years and the early school years. So these two stages are very important for the formation of, am I a girl or am I a boy? And this is where we need to be intentional about actually making it certain for the child that he's a boy or he's a girl. Middle school is when you begin to see, or when I started seeing this topic about the romantic inclinations, the ones I told you about. I see it in this stage. And then the sexual orientation stage, and also again the gender identity comes up again back in the early adolescence, later adolescence, and then the early adulthood years. Okay, I guess now we can look at the questions, inshallah, bismillah. Let's see. How to address gender identification to assert the Islamic position and at the same time without coming off stern and place for others. and place hatred in our children's heart for others. This is very important. Yes, at this point that the person is asking, it's extremely important, yes, to assert our position and just simply say other people see it differently. Just like that. We don't need to we don't need to condemn them. We don't need to say something like, oh, these are horrible people, they are sinning, God is very angry with them. There is no need to say any of this stuff. We just need to talk about us and what we believe, and that other people do it differently. It's the same thing like when we're talking about other faiths. It's the same thing. Like, I'm sure all of you as parents have had to address this particular point or question with your children. We are Muslims. This is what we believe in. He is a Christian. This is what he believes in. This is a Jew. This is what he believes. This is a Buddhist. This is what they believe in. We live in a pluralistic society here in the US. We cannot live in a bubble. So we need to acknowledge how different people do things differently with respect. Okay, we should not just be judgmental against it. This is the problem happens when we talk to our children with judgment against other people and make other people as horrible people, sinful, and very bad. So that's what we need to avoid. Okay, let's see. This is not very easy to maneuver. Okay, let's see. What did she say? Allah is merciful and He is forgiving. So as humans, how do we address clear yet inclusive? I think I answered this question. And I always told my children, okay, like this is a person, for example, right now in front of you who doesn't believe in God at all, but you don't know how he is gonna die. He could die a better Muslim than you and I. So that's what I always told my children. I said, we are not the judges. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only judge. And we are going to be judged by by all of everything that we have done in our life. So if I'm seeing someone doing something wrong right now, that's a moment in time. I have no idea how they're going to be, in the next moment. Maybe they're going to repent. Maybe they're going to find their way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, I am going to assert my position as a Muslim and what I am teaching my children and tell them this is what I believe and this is what I'm going to teach you and this is who we are. Other people see it differently. And that's, for, Surah Al-Kafirun, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. It's some scholars, they tell you, it is said in our tradition that Surah Al-Kafirun is equal to 1/4 of the Quran. Imagine this very small and short surah equal to 1/4 of the Quran. And what is it talking about? It's talking about how we have our faith and other people have their faith. It's just emphasizing this point. It goes back and forth, emphasizing this is my faith, this is your faith, because this is the human condition. That it's the human global condition, as we have so many different faith and traditions all over the world, and we need to learn how to live with them.
I have a question.
I can't get to the last questions. I'm so sorry. Huwaida, can you help me? Because I don't know why mine is kind of stuck here.
Let me try. I have here Dr. Halima Sheikhli. She has a question.
Assalamu
Okay.
alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa
Much
barakatuh.
for a very enlightening and important presentation. And thank you, Huwaida, for making this available. I have a question about, you mentioned it about who they, the kids are around in the environment of the circle of friends. But there's cases which is happening, and we see that, all of a sudden somebody gets out of the closet, their best friend, whom they have been friends for years, and all of a sudden identifies as gay or lesbian. And then the parents are in a dilemma, telling the child to, I think you got what I mean. How do you deal with these cases?
So I'm going to tell you how I would encourage people to deal with it. It doesn't mean that people are going to like my answer. And I know that because I've already gotten, some people did not like my answer when I shared it before. I am focusing on the reality that our children are growing up in the West, in the US, and they are going to have coworkers, they're going to have colleagues, they're going to have, they're going to interact with people who identify as, gay and lesbians throughout their life living in the US. So my invitation is that I don't tell my child, you're not going to be their friend anymore. I do not recommend that at all. I recommend that I sit with my child and say, okay, so what's your understanding of what's happening? What's your understanding of our Islamic point of view on this particular issue? Where do you think the boundaries need to be with you, between you and your friend now that you know that he's coming out as gay? Yani, for example, if it's my son, okay, and he has a friend who came out as gay, what am I going to be worried about, me as a parent? I'm going to be worried about that his friend is going to hit on him and maybe tempt him to actually be his gay friend and engage in a haram relationship. That would be my worry as a parent. So I'm going to sit with him, like I said earlier about the teaching moment. I'm going to have that teaching moment. Hey, Habibi, okay, your friend now came out as gay. I am worried about this. I'll be very open with my son. I will say to him, okay, I'm very worried that maybe he is going to like you and he wants to hit on you and wants to have a sexual relationship with you. I'll be very open with by the way, I'm encouraging all of you to be very open and direct with your children. Don't beat around the bush, okay? If you're worried about something, be clear about what you're worried about. And I'll tell you from my work with all these young people out there, they understand the boundary between, oh, my friend is gay, but I know how to actually be careful. I know the boundary that I'm not gonna be his gay friend, or I'm not gonna have a sexual relationship with him. They know that, our young people, they do know it. So, so my response or my answer to your question: teaching moment, conversation, discussion, understand what does the child understand. I'm not going to invite the child to cut off the relationship with his friend. However, I'm going to say something. If you are feeling uncomfortable with your friend right now, if he's not treating you, if he's not respecting the boundary with you, then you need to do something about it. Maybe you need to distance yourself from him. But from my observation of our young people who are dealing with their who are dealing with people who identify as lesbian and gay in their schools or college or work, they actually know how to deal with them way better than what the parents are thinking. And it's not as bad as what the parents are thinking. Actually, our young people are hiding from their parents that they have friends who identify as gay and lesbian, just because they know that their parents are not going to be open to having discussions with them about this issue.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't want to take the floor just me being asking questions, but it is not, in some cases, it's not as simple as just that. What if they want to say, like, there is parades for the gay and there is support for the gay and there is, because in general, majority of them, or if not all of them, they are very nice people, respectful people on a personal level, which kids, and I'm talking about teenagers specifically, I'm not talking about adult. You could form relations and you would love to form relations. And so, as I said, these are my fears more than the fear of them, being engaged in these acts.
So thank you for sharing this. And, someone the other day, I was at a luncheon, and the reality of the situation is our young people in our community are much more open to the rights of gay people who identify as gay and lesbians than, you know, the parent generation. Way more open. Yes, it's true. This is what's happening, and this is why we need to have a conversation at home, in the family, to have a discussion about what they think and what we think. And even among the parent generation, you're going to have people who have different opinions about all this stuff. So it goes back to the family and, you know, what they actually think is more important, and what they want to, you know, what they want to do with it. So, and every person is going to go through their own journey. I have known and I'll tell you again, this is part of my work. I see, you know, I've been working with this for a while. So I had teenagers who believed that they were bisexual when they were in high school. Okay. Then as they neared the end of their 20s, they recognized that they're actually heterosexual, that they were just influenced by the talk in the media or their friends or high school, whatever, and they believed they were bisexual when they recognized later on that they were not. And that's why, again, I'm emphasizing open conversations at home with the family, with someone who really understands the nuances of this. So we can tell this young teen, oh, right now, this is what you believe, you are bisexual. We're not gonna force, we're not gonna say, no, you're not bisexual, you're heterosexual. We're just gonna, okay, so you believe you're bisexual. Okay, let's see with time what you are, you know, what you're gonna believe. Because when it comes to these identities from an Islamic point of view, what do we care about? We care about the behavior. So whether the person is bisexual, heterosexual, homosexual, regardless of the identity, how are they behaving? This is our focus as parents. We're not going to allow, for example, a heterosexual girl or a heterosexual boy to go and have relationships, sexual relationships outside of marriage. That's not acceptable. It's the same thing. So, inshallah khair. Yani it's again, it's very nuanced, very complicated, and it's a big fitna for all of us. Big, huge fitna, subhanallah.
Shada, we have Shada, you said you have a question. Shada, are you there?
السلام عليكم.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
يعطيك العافية. That was an interesting topic. I might just speak a little bit in Arabic. Maybe somebody can later explain to others. I'm just very new to the country. It's really hard for me to understand or accept these kind of stuff. So one day I was talking to them about how يعني إنه أنا مش قادرة يعني أقول يعني أنا عم بفهمهم إنه علاقة الشذوذ يهتز إلها عرش الرحمن، وأنا هذا إشي يعني كتير حرام ومش مقبول أبدا وما بنحترمه أبدا هذا الإشي. فأنا ما بعرف إذا غلط أنا كنت بحكي له هذا الإشي، بس يعني إذا هو إشي بيهتز إله عرش الرحمن، كيف إحنا بدنا نطلب من أولادنا إنه يحترموا أصحابهم؟ at least أوكي مش رح يهينوهم أو to bully them، بس at least stay away يعني away from them، عشان إحنا مثلا ما بنشبههم. يعني مثلا بنتي الصغيرة اللي بكي جي 2 وكان أول صدمة لإلي، رجعت تحكي لي إنه واحد معاها بالمدرسة كان بحكي لها إنه it's okay إنه أمان to marry a man and a woman to marry a woman. قلت لها أوكي أنت شو حكيتي؟ صارت تحكي له no, this is against nature and this is not right and we can't do this, and even you can't make any relationship until you are grown up and you have to get married. You can't have a relationship. So I'm a little bit confused if I explained that wrong to my kids.
Okay, so Huwaida, you want to translate the part that she said in Arabic first, and then we can maybe address.
Sorry, Taif, can you translate? I was busy with an email.
Sure, no problem. So the question is specifically, how can we be supportive to our children and saying it is okay to befriend or to give support to their gay or lesbian friends when we know that Arsh al-Rahman, that Allah's, the simple way to describe the chair, Allah's chair, shakes from this particular subject. So if this subject is so sensitive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then how are we simplifying it and saying it's okay to accept these friends?
First thing I want to say to the person who was asking the question, it took me, Noha, personally, a long time to come to terms with the homosexuality piece. Okay, it took me a long time to come to terms with it and understand it, and I really didn't understand it very well in the beginning. Okay. So I understand where you're at, because as you told us, you are new to this country, and I fully understand, and you're facing questions that living in, a majority Muslim country, we may not have to even think about or, even reflect on. So I pray for you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you, inshallah, bismillah, the answer that you will be comfortable with, and will give you peace. And it's not about whether what you did is wrong or right with your child. No, it's not about that. It's just about different ideas and different suggestions on maybe how to handle the situation. And every person needs to do it in the way that they are comfortable with. For me as a therapist, because I see the bigger picture, for you guys, you are dealing with it only in your family. So I see it on a wider range in terms of, like, I see these children growing up, I see them going into high school, I see them going to college. So I'm looking at it from a wider lens than the one you are maybe necessarily looking at. So in addition to what your daughter, mashallah, told your child, okay, and nothing wrong with anything that she said, except maybe adding to it the piece, we as Muslims believe that. This is like the point I'm trying to emphasize, that we say this is coming from our faith. We as Muslims, this is what we believe, because there are other people who don't believe what we believe. That's all I'm saying, that you add to your conversations and discussions with your children. So when they go and talk to their friends, they are not dismissed. Because this boy that came to your daughter and he was talking to her, he is talking about his belief. This is what he believes, whatever in their family, this is what they believe. So in order for her to have credibility, and in order for her opinion to stand, she needs to add with the piece about, as Muslims, this is what we believe. Because he can come back at her and tell her, okay, no, you're wrong. I don't believe this, and this person doesn't believe this, and then where do we end? So and this is what the Surah Al-Kafirun talks about. Lakum dinukum waliya din. Yani, I believe that, you don't believe that. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I know, this journey with coming to terms with how we're going to handle this issue in the US is a long journey. I know from myself, it took me a long time to come to terms with it. So inshallah khair.
There's a question that was also posted. It said, is there any data, or have you had any success in your practice in counseling a kid who has gender dysphoria to accept their gender of birth?
So what I usually do with people who are struggling with that is if okay, first of all, I want to see where this child or young person is in terms of their belief in the faith of Islam. Like, am I going to use Islam as a way to help them, or are they already rejecting Islam? Because if the child or the young person is not using Islam as the driving force for their life, it's not going to help them for me to tell them, oh no, it's haram to do this. You shouldn't be doing this. This is halal, this is haram. Because that's not their lens anyway. So I will need to work with them in terms of like what decisions are they gonna make? And are these decisions gonna be good for them on the long run or not? And typically, not typically, but the cases I have worked with where they had this confusion about their gender identity or sexual identity, typically, as I said earlier, after the age of 25, they actually revert back to their genetic makeup identity, if you will, on their own. But so for parents, I would suggest that you need to be patient. You need to focus on behavior, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and take it one day at a time. It's very hard situation. Yeah.
There was another question earlier by a brother. It says, I want to make sure I understand the toys point correctly. Is it okay if my son would play with dolls, etc.?
So if the child is like only playing with dolls, like we're not offering other toys, then yes, I would have a concern, and then I would redirect. But if the dolls are part of the larger toy choices out there in the room, and he's playing with dolls every now and then, I'm not going to make an issue out of it. I'm not going to go to him and say, you're a boy, you cannot play with dolls. That's what I meant.
There was a sister who she said that she had a question, Sister Hind.
Yes, Sister Noha, I have a few questions actually. So your clients, when they come to you, are they brought by their parents or they come by themselves, especially if they are teenagers and young kids?
No, they come by because their parents are worried about them.
Worried about that. And then
Yeah.
my second question is, we talked about individualism and that how we like this new generation, it's focused about themselves and being individual. So my kids are young, so raising our kids in a collective community, would that help? For example, me telling them your actions are very important and affects our family and our community. Would that, me saying that, am I guilt tripping my kids? Am I trapping them? Be like, oh, don't overthink things or don't try new things because you know that thing is going to hurt our community and our family. Using these kind of words, are they guilt tripping or really make them understand their boundaries?
Very good question. So I look at it from a psychological point of view. So the way if I understood your framing correctly and help me make sure I understand you correctly. So you're saying your choices are going to impact the family and the community. Are you saying that behave correctly or otherwise the family is going to be embarrassed and the community will be embarrassed? Is this what you mean?
And that's why that's it kind of, because like growing up in a Arab household and Arab community, it's always that saying is like, do not act this way, you're gonna bring shame to the family, or like having that mentality. And of course I want to be away from saying that. I don't want you to feel like you're ashamed or anything, but how would I bring it to my kids that your action would affect the family? Of course, we're going to love you the way you are. We're going to love you wherever you do. But still, I want you to be cautious of your actions because it has effect on the family, on the community, on your religion, without really having that burden inside them that you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
So I really appreciate you asking this question. Really, really appreciate you asking this question because that's sometimes I get the young people in high school and in college, and this is the thing that hurts them the most. Not the most, but one of the things that really bothers them is when the family is connecting and saying, oh, don't do this because it's gonna embarrass us or embarrass the community or embarrass the religion. And from a psychological point of view, this is kind of called external motivation. And the external motivation is not as effective as internal motivation. So I'm gonna invite you, because you're talking about you want to minimize the individualistic trend in the child, right? You started talking, okay,
That's what I've been noticing in teenagers and Gen Zs, for example. It's their individualism, and they just think about them. Whatever action they do, it doesn't matter what the family goes through or the community goes through, they think about themselves. And I don't know if it's that statistically right that they identify as gay or lesbian just because they want to have something different. They want to identify as themselves without really thinking what's the consequences having on the people around them.
So let's go back to your original question, which is how do I minimize the individualistic tendencies within a child and make them more doing the interdependent? So we do
without the damage we would do as what our parents or our previous generation did to us and to the Arabic, like to culture we grow up in, that guilt tripping. If you don't do this thing, we're gonna be devastated. Every action you do, it's gonna affect us. How we encouraged, we are working as a family and collectively and not just individually without the guilt tripping and the psychological trauma after.
Yeah, so the number one strategy to do that is actually to have the child face the ramifications and consequences of their actions. And it starts early. I'm not talking about punishing them, but I'll give you small examples just to hopefully you will get the idea. Because what happens sometimes in our community is we cater so much to the children and we overdo for them when they are little. And then when they grow up and become teens, they have been used to being catered to and taken care of so much that when they're older and we're asking them to help, they look at us like, okay, you flipped on me. Okay, that's not what I'm used to at home. I'm not used to doing anything at home. I'm used to you taking care of me, and I am the king and the queen of the house. And now you're asking me to do things for you. So you get resistance. So from early on, we want to teach children to help around the house, even in small chores. Like, don't do things for children that they can do for themselves. For example, the other day, I went with my my daughter-in-law to pick up my grandchildren from school. I have one in preschool and one in kindergarten. So they come out from the classroom, and then my grandson, who's in kindergarten, he hands me his backpack. I hold his backpack. I walk with him, a few steps. His mom, she stops him and she says, "You need to carry your backpack." That small thing is like teaching responsibility and teaching that you are responsible for your thing. You can't have your grandma carry your backpack. This is like a very small example, but multiply this by many interactions in our daily life. This is how we show kids the impact of their behavior on us without us saying, don't do this because you're going to embarrass us. No, we're going to focus on responsibility. We're going to focus on, for example, another one is giving them allowances, because allowances and sticking to the allowance, not over giving. Like if they run out of allowance and come and ask us for more money and we give them more money, we're not teaching responsibility. We're not teaching them how to actually also be aware that we are not, we're not a bank that has endless amount of money. So what I'm trying to say is there are many instances in our daily interactions. We can get the children to really understand the impact of their action on everyone around them in a very respectful manner. And that's how they learn that they are not the kings and queens of the family, that they are not living, that the world doesn't revolve around them, and that they need to take care, or they need to pay attention, to the needs of the people around them. There are many, many other ways of doing it. And that's, the time right now doesn't help, doesn't allow me to go into it. But I'm emphasizing responsibility. Having them deal, having them own responsibility for what they need, they can do and can take care of. That would help them actually be more interdependent and less individualistic in their tendencies and their inclinations. And we're over time, by the way.
We're just enjoying all this information you're giving us and educating us. And I don't know if there is any more questions or we can end.
I think
Can I say one thing especially because we have a lot of the parents from Ansar Academy. We have some books in our Ansar Academy. It's talking about puberty and how Muslim boys and girls deal with their body changes. And we actually have few copies if you encourage your kids to check them out. And even one of the girls, she's like, thank you, I got my period last week and it really helped her. So even like exactly what Dr. Noha said, like our kids tune us really fast. So like if they read it and it's on their own time, I think it's very beneficial for them. And we have few copies for boys and girls too.
And it's way better than them reading this information on social media. Way better.
And
Much
it's
more
targeted
scientific.
to Muslim kids too.
Yes, yes. That's actually a great idea that you have books available on this topic for kids to read. And then I'm wondering, do you actually do also sexual education sessions for the kids in the school?
Well, inshallah, we are planning to do it to start next school year.
Next school year.
Starting August next school year. We'll discuss that with parents, and we have some materials that we're going to be sharing with them. And we have a teacher that will be applying it like once a month.
Amazing, because it's sometimes kids, it's a very awkward topic for kids, and I know like they start, but it also could be easier for them to actually learn about it in the context of with other kids. Of course, separate genders.
Of course.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
But it could be easier than having the talk with their parents. But I think it's very important actually that you are offering this service. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
At this time, I'd like to take the opportunity, if there's no more urgent questions, to thank all the attendees for your participation, for taking the time to join us in this very informative session that Sister Noha has blessed us with her time, with her knowledge, with her experience. We make dua for all the parents and Sister Noha and everybody who attended this and everyone in our community to make this very difficult time an easy time for them, and to guide us into answering our children in the best way, and to not mislead them or show we are disrespecting any of Allah's creation. At the same time, while we are obeying Allah's commands and Allah's teaching to us and the Prophet ﷺ, and that we steadfast by our Muslim values under the banner of Islam rather than under the cultural values, which is very important for us to always look at from the Islamic point of view rather than the cultural point of view. Sister Noha, Jazakillah khair for all your time, your efforts on putting it together. We're looking very much forward for the next session, inshallah. And if I'm not mistaken, that would be the 26th of February,
Next week,
inshallah.
Inshallah.
And that one is going to be about social media and the impacts on our youth, and again, how to address it and the challenges that we're facing. So we look forward for all of you, inshallah, to join us. Please, if you have any questions that are missed that or we could not address, or if you feel very uncomfortable in addressing them here on the chat forum, feel free to email myself or Huwaida or any way to get a hold of us and give us those questions. We can pass them to Sister Noha, inshallah, and then we can get you the answers that you need privately. If anybody needs any further assistance, we're here to help you. We're here to assist in the community in any possible way. And barakallah fikum, jazakumullah khair. And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wal asr, inna al-insana fi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat wa tawasaw bil-haqq wa tawasaw bis-sabr. Allahumma salli wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa lil liqa, inshallah, fi al-asbu' al-muqbil. We pray to God to protect you all, and inshallah we meet again next week.
Before you go, Dr. Taif,
Yes.
Sister Noha, I just want to make my comment. I listened to this very interesting program. Some of you know me. I happen to be blessed with the position as the president of the Ansar board. This is a very, very, very meaningful and important subject to the entire community, entire country, in fact, and more important to our Islamic community. Sister Noha, an awesome job. I've learned a lot of stuff here. Sister Huwaida, thank you for making sure this happened. Is there a recording of the entire program today that can be shared or helped with other persons who still have questions? And maybe we'll get answers from you. Jazakallah khair, and alhamdulillah for educating all of us today as parents.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Of course, there will be a recording. We're going to put it, inshallah, in our YouTube channel. We'll share it also personally to everyone who attended today, inshallah.
And as well as maybe our masjid.
Yes,
Somehow the
inshallah.
other community, the masjid, there are a lot of people who are shy
Yes.
and is afraid to even participate. But it's an important subject that needs to be exposed openly.
Sure.
And Huwaida, you can also share with the parents that we talk, Munira and I, we talk about this issue in the parenting book. So if people want to read about this.
Would you please share the link with us or the book so we can share it with the community?
Yeah.
If you have one, can you show it to us? There we go. Perfect.
Here we go. Here we go. Yeah.
So there's Arabic, there's English, and there's actually French too, but I don't have the French copy.
Raise it a little bit. Yes, yes. Okay. Lawhatul Fusayfisa. Inshallah, if you can also share with us the link on Amazon, we can share it with others.
I'll email it to you.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Jazakumullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Bi'amanillah.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum. Thank you. Shukran, Dr. Halima. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.